what we say or think is controlled or dictated, then we do not have any freedom whatsoever. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Int'l, and today is World Press Freedom Day.
Good morning. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf. Welcome.
Welcome to the program. I am Bukola Koka.
Wish I had a quote as well, but there's one. Today is May 3, 2023, and it's World Press Freedom Day. I'm Ayo Makinde. Welcome to the program.
Indeed, Ayo, I like the fact that you always keep us on our toes, reminding us of what the date is and what day it is, because sometimes in the course of living, you could actually lose track of time, and you begin to wonder, what day, do you ever get to that point where, what day is it today?
Yes, I have never been good with dates. I've never been good. If I'm going to a bank or anywhere that would require, I can ask up to 3 times if I have to fill 3 different forms.
Yeah.
At the same occasion. Sorry, what's today's date again? No, just leave.
I'm telling you, just leave. And that's the beauty of being free. But sometimes I tend to ask the question, how free is the free? The one who says he's actually free, how free is that person? Today we're celebrating the freedom of the press, and the theme is centered around the fact that press freedom is actually the cornerstone of freedom of expression, so to speak. So if we're not allowed to speak, if you're not allowed to express yourself, then how free are you in every sense of the word? But at the same time, when you have freedom without some level of restraint, then it becomes a problem. Because as I say, where your freedom ends is where the other person's, where your right ends or where your right begins, whichever way we want to look at it, that's where the next person's own right or freedom also begins. And so that intertwine, where everybody's right or freedoms come to play, is where we should all find ourselves and ensure that my living, my expression is not a hindrance to Maokwe's expression or her living, and together we can both live and maximize all of us.
I've since found that anything can be used, against you in a court of law, because what you now find is the government will say, oh, your expression is inhibiting how it is that we're carrying out our work. But, in a democracy, and I think that's one of the beauties of a democracy. I remember having a conversation with Bishop Kuka some time ago, and I was talking about the dividends of democracy and how people are beginning to lament the fact that they're not seeing the connection between a democracy and improvements in their way of life. They're not seeing that connection in terms of the development that a democracy should bring about. And this argument has been on and on. If you listen, sometimes you hear people say, oh, the greatest things we achieved were done under the military. The military did this, the military did that. And I'm not taking anything away from what the military did. And I remember him looking at me and saying, Maokwe, that's where people misunderstand the beauty of democracy. The beauty of democracy is not in the dividends that it brings you. The biggest dividend that any democracy gives you is freedom. And it's freedom to express yourself. That is the beauty of democracy. And it really got me thinking about it, because what we really yearned for under the military. I remember growing up as a child under military rule, even though, we had not experienced anything. By the time I was born, Nigeria was already under military rule, and all of the struggles we saw was for Nigeria to be away from military rule, for Nigeria to enter a democracy. And significantly, we understand that this year marks 30 years since we started celebrating World Press Freedom Day. 1993 was the year that Nigeria had a significant election, which was supposed to usher her into that democracy, which didn't, which was sadly aborted. So this is where we currently are. I remember 1993, how old was I? I was 10 at the time, and I remember reading magazines. Int'l magazine was a favorite of my father's, which he used to buy, and we used to read. And I remember reading, journalists writing underground. I had very vivid pictures of what underground meant. I thought they were literally underground. So coming from that to where we currently are, where I can do this as a job, comfortably and speak. Speak freely, at least to
some extent.
Yes, within rules and within the confines. It's something I shouldn't be toyed with. The fact that, we have social media, I do recall when Twitter was banned in Nigeria and the uproar that came with it. It's since been unbanned and people have freedom of expression. All the other social media platforms are there, Facebook, Instagram, you name them. And we have all of these mediums of expression. The papers are thriving, even though, yes, there's another struggle, in terms of, the financial viability, of what is currently happening in the media space. So, it is wonderful to see. I think that sometimes if you don't lose a thing, you might not really understand what it is that you have. I sincerely hope that we don't have to lose it before we understand the value of what it is that we have. Let us continue to celebrate, this freedom that we have, and let us continue to use it to push for the betterment of our society, which is essentially what this job and even what the press is about, fighting for a better and a just society. Bukola and Ayo.
Yes, indeed, Markwe. It's interesting how you always somehow peep into my notes. But, just to add a few points, one of the most important points and our factors that reinforces the value of that very precious right to freedom that we enjoy, especially as our democracy has grown and matured over the years, is the rise of citizen journalism, particularly in this very vast, this huge social media space, online, where we have a kaleidoscope of opinions, when citizens can express themselves. It really is the beauty of democracy.
And exchange ideas.
It's the beauty of democracy. And just to compare that, one of the points that Marco was making earlier, about, the military era, I recall growing up during that time as well. And one of the snags of that time was the difficulty in expression. People always seem to be looking over their backs, when you had to express political opinion. There was a very vivid fear at the time of criticizing the government. And we saw, just how much attacks that, the press had to suffer at that time. And it was the press also that did the hard work, that put the military government on its toes. And that brought us to where we are today. So it gives me a bittersweet moment, to talk about it at this time and at this age doing this job. It makes me privileged. And at the same time, it gives me cause to reflect, even on the challenges that Nigerian journalists are experiencing. Besides the right that the Constitution confers us, to bring government to account, the press is also some form of ombudsman, of the people. We're supposed to give expression to the voiceless. So when the press is caught in the fray, of reporting dissent, reporting the right to assembly, and at this time we remember our colleagues, Precious Owolabi, Pelumi Onifade, those that were somehow along the line, they met their untimely death, while reporting. We should recommit ourselves to that hard work, to protect that space, the right to citizens' expression and the right, to journalists to do their jobs and improve the society. Ayo.
You just brought home one thing that many people do not understand about the job that we do, and that is the price we have to pay.
Absolutely.
For instance, there is a war going on in Sudan right now. And it is being reported by some people. There is a war going on in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine. And there are journalists reporting it. The whole idea is to let you know what's going on so you can make informed decisions. Now, you don't always have to understand what journalists have to do to get the news to you. But understand that like doctors, like journalists, like accountants, like engineers, like lawyers, journalists do have certain ethics by which they do what they do. So even if it doesn't sound like what you want to hear, there is always something about journalists. We call it balance. We always want to get the other side. That's why most of the time we'll have a guest here And we always have the other side, especially if there is a dispute. We are at liberty to do what we do, but we also recognize that there is no such thing as absolute freedom, because where your own ends, that's where mine starts. Once you begin to creep into my own territory, that's what the law is about. And so, as we all celebrate World Press Freedom Day, can you please empathize with the fact that journalists pay a huge sum to get the information to you? And you may not always understand what we are saying. You may not always agree with us, but at least recognize it came at a price.
And just to add to that, Ayo, is this distrust that we sometimes have to suffer at the hands of the people that we're trying to help, particularly when we're working on investigative stories. This is just to appeal to the public to understand that the journalists, ultimately is on the side of the people. And when we try to court your friendship, just be on the side of the journalist, because eventually the journalist is on your side and is working in your own interests. So the distrust doesn't always help the journalists in the course of their work. And
the price is huge. It also sometimes includes lives, as you have mentioned the other time. In Int'l, journalist in Kano, Owolabi, a youth corper who also died in the course of working here at Channels Television. These are costs that we have to pay beyond any and everything else. Loss of peace. I know journalists like Bukola and Mokwe sometimes have to come with their little ones to the studio so you can get the correct information. You don't have to understand, you don't have to agree. Please empathize with the press. Nyota.
And while we do what we have to do, it's all in the service of humanity. To put the light out there, to hold the government accountable for the people. But the people also need to understand that this is service that the journalists render, and they pay sometimes the ultimate price. Our colleagues, we've lost colleagues, not just Channels TV, around the world, we've lost colleagues who are in this business to serve. But to the government, there's also room for you to communicate, which is the journalists are there, the press is there as a channel for you to communicate to the people you came and chose to serve. You made the choice to serve. Let the channel, let the press, Channels TV, for instance, be an avenue for you to communicate and understand that we will hold you accountable in the course of doing this job of serving the people of Nigeria and the world. Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment, and we'll look at what the papers, our colleagues in the print, have to say. I will start out with the Leadership newspaper, and this is what they lead with. Ahead of inauguration, rent, property value surge in Abuja.
Blessed be those who own property in Abuja.
And blessed also are those who are renting properties, who are coming or who are living in rented properties in Abuja, because even though the rent might increase, don't worry, somehow grace will ensure that you have the resources to pay for your rent without having to embezzle or steal. But then that's what the Leadership newspaper is reading with. Ahead of inauguration, rent, property values surge in Abuja, and see the riders, estate developers, landlords, agents make brisk business. New lawmakers, political
appointments. It's a good side hustle, Nyota. You should consider it.
Well.
Agency.
But you see, the kind of work we do is such that you put your whole life and your everything about you into this business. So a side hustle like this can't work for me.
Come on.
I do understand. New lawmakers, political appointees scramble for accommodation. So the ones who were there before, are they going to stay back in Abuja, or would they move to other places so that the ones coming in can find space? But how be it, Mark, we all know that many houses in Abuja are empty, so there's always room for everyone. Cost of building materials, inflation blamed. Well, page 4 has the rest, has more on this story. Go read it up and see what they're saying. Agora policy task president-elect on prudence, fiscal responsibility. Well, what's the Agora policy? Well, pick it up and read from the front page to page 7. It's a think tank, yeah.
Yes, it is. So
read up and find out. Prudent and fiscal responsibility. I wonder how that will work out. If rents are increasing, how do all of these things tie in? And I remember having a conversation with someone about the cost of accommodation, the cost of housing, the fact that we have a housing deficit. And yesterday also the president, in commissioning one of the housing estates, said that the promise on change in the housing area has been met. I wonder if that's out. The jury's still out there on that one.
It's all the way in Zuba.
All the way in Zuba.
So you have to ask yourself, how are people supposed to commute to town, all the way from Zuba?
Public transportation.
Public transportation is non-existent in Abuja.
Oh, boy.
Absolutely non-existent. So,
anyway, let's flip it. Go to from page 1 to page 7. You'll find more on that. Above the nameplate, PMB reappoints Abike Dabri-Erewa as NIDCOM chairman in the midst of the conversation of evacuating Nigerians from Sudan.
Yeah.
Mr. Abike Dabri-Erewa gets reappointed, even though that waits for the Senate to confirm and all of that. But this is the one. There was a lot of excitement yesterday. Adamawa REC in police custody says, "I didn't collect bribe." Check page 15. If you listen to that in his statement when he was talking to the media, he said, "If I collected money from anybody, they would be asking me to refund the bribe, but nobody's asking me for anything. Evidence that I didn't collect anything from anybody." But well, that's for you to decide. That's it on Leadership newspaper.
Well, take a look at what Vanguard newspapers has on the front page. They're following up very strongly on the Adamawa REC story. No regrets declaring Binani winner, says Adamawa REC. That's what he said. Police arrests grill him in Abuja. Investigations continue. Other officials fingered under interrogation. I didn't collect 2 billion naira bribe. That's according to Yunusa Ari, that's the REC. Says bribe allegation, social media hype. The story is on page 5 of the paper. The big question for me, Nyota, is why we had to wait for this REC to grant an interview to the BBC before this man was apprehended. So nobody could find him, but somehow journalists knew where he was and they could, have a very good interview with him. And the police all of this time. Anyways, let's just say better late than never. Let us just hope that this will also, see the matter in court. Let us imagine that the police has been doing a background investigation which did not need him to come in. Because really nothing explains why it is.
Remember one of those days we actually asked the question here, where is the Adamawa REC?
Right, yeah. We keep asking. Oh, well, take a look at all the stories here. Ekweremadu, tempered justice with mercy. Reps, ECOWAS Parliament urge UK government. On page 11 is where you find details. Sudan, second batch of Nigerian evacuees arrive Port Sudan. So it does appear that the evacuation is going on progressively. Oshibajo, symbol of national unity, say Buhari, Gowon, governors, others. It's on page 26 of the paper. And then take a look at this, just what we talked about. World Press Freedom Day. As a Nigerian Guild of Editors tasks incoming government on safety of journalists. That is also there on the front page. They have a plethora of stories for you on the front page of the Vanguard newspapers. There's also Vanguard Sports on the back page. 2023 Under-17 AFCON. Gusau charges Eaglets to overpower Morocco. Yes, Eaglets, you can do it. We'll leave it there for Vanguard newspapers.
And turn to Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust newspaper has, an interesting lineup for you this morning. But let's start with the big story. Senate presidency, Akpabio, Yari scramble for PDP senators. Opposition reps-elect meet. Strategize to produce speaker. So that majority in the minority factor is still very real at this round of assembly, the 10th National Assembly to be precise, even though, lawmakers in the opposition have said consistently that, look, the APC is not going to just stand by and watch and allow the opposition, to have a say in who becomes the Senate president or who becomes the speaker. But this appears to be playing out right before our eyes, Ayo.
Well, I guess we only have to just wait and see, because so long as it is politicians, sometimes 1 hour is a day.
Yeah, about to be quite a number of surprises. But take a look at the second rider. APC NWC meets today. So we're waiting to see, what the party has to say about that. Go above the nameplate and see this one. We've been talking about it for much of the week and from about last week. Sudan crisis. First batch of stranded Nigerians may return today, and we're keeping our eyes on that process. We have our correspondent on standby waiting to receive the Nigerian students. And we've been told, quite reassuringly, that the last batch of, I think, 2,500 students have been evacuated from universities in Sudan. So that's comforting. Let's go to the bottom of Daily Trust now to find this one. 2 months after elections, customs officers yet to get allowances. Now, this is unpalatable. Who's in charge of disbursing allowances to customs officers? Why haven't they gotten their allowances when elections have been conducted?
It's usually very, very disturbing when we hear these kinds of stories, because it definitely negatively impacts on commitment. I mean, if you're not going to pay, don't promise. Because once you make a promise to people, it's only natural for their minds to be there.
Sometimes this, allowances have little to do with promise, but more to do with obligation.
That's my point.
The officials who work during elections are entitled to their pay.
It is integrated into some form of promises that go with the assignment. I mean, if you do not serve, you don't get that kind of privilege. Yeah. So if it's going to be scrapped, can you just scrap it and let there be no expectations? But if there are expectations, I mean, some things are just supposed to be on a conveyor belt.
Cast in stone. Well, we hope that it just adds to what we say about how the elections have come, but have certainly not gone. So that conversation continues. Two more just under that. Government not responsible for job creation. That's ascribed to the presidency. That's another debate. And lastly, 27 days to hand over. Tambuwa appoints 23 perm secs, 15 DGs. Let's leave it there for the Daily Trust newspaper.
The worst case, it'll be on your CV as you were a PAMSEC if you happen to be removed. This Nigeria covers the prevailing stories in a very interesting way. Yes, that's it. Yes, we got him. So, Markwe, I don't know whether we can say that question is answered now, but hey, please confirm arrest of embattled Adamawa REC. I don't regret my actions, says Yunusa Ari. Find the details of that story on page 2. Should they have been, yes, we got him finally? I don't know. The details you'll find on the inside pages. Right under the picture on the front page, Obi lampoons treason, dual citizenship impersonation charges. Accuses information minister of, quote, rascality, end of quote. Find the details on page 13 of the paper this morning. That's This Nigeria Today.
The Guardian newspaper is next, and this is what they have. A big caption there. Negotiations. Intense lobbying among contenders as NWC meets. That's about the Senate presidency. But see the picture there, the picture of that chair.
The seat.
That chair. And then the 9 faces beside it. How many of them? And the funny thing, Mark, I mean, and guys, look at this. 9 faces here, 4 of them former governors. seeking to be Senate president. Ooh. Let's see how it goes. It's the NWC of the APC's meeting. I mean, going by the papers, on page 6, you get details of that story. Would the NWC tend to support any one of these 9 faces? Well, then CBN places 7,552 account holders on BVN watch lists. Check page 15 for details. Why are they being placed on the watch list? And this BVN matter and the NIN, at what point do they interface? That conversation is still out there. At what point does the BVN and the NIN come together to say, okay, for security sake, for security purposes and all of that? At what point do we see, I mean, out there you have in other climes you have just one number. But in Nigeria, you have like multiple numbers. You have your voters number, you have your NIN, you have your BVN.
Why do you want the BVN and the NIN to come together, though?
Come on now, identify. Okay, that's why I put it out there. So let's to streamline how many numbers you have to remember every day. But let's go on. Sudan crisis. Lawmakers summon Oyema, Dabri Erewa, NEMA officials. Check page 3 for details of that. Fintiri hails arrest of fleeing Adamawa REC 2 weeks after. Crisis rocks Abia Assembly as members impeach Speaker. Oh boy. Plenty of news out there. But that's it from The Guardian. And a look at what some of the dailies are saying. The news in the days. We'll be back in a moment to look at other matters and some of them related to what the papers are saying. Please stay with us.
Ni ka gani game da na faɗa ka karɓi kuɗi ta kowane hali don ka taimaki wani kai wani abu haramun ne kuma ni wallahi wannan kuɗi zargi ne kawai da ba shi da tasiri ko kaɗan biliyan biyu na zan kai ta ni ma kana gida a social media ana cewa an bani biliyan biyu har yana cewa zan ka ci abinka baba so ina karɓi biliyan biyu malam Ibrahim ya zai da ita ai Allah ba zai barka ba da na zo na karanta maka amma dai tsakanin su da ita ta sayi ƙuri'a da wani zaben da ake da wannan ta samu ƙuri'a 428,173 shi kuma Fintir ya samu 422,303 to da ka yi yanzu wannan hukunci da ka yi ba da ka yi ne da ka ni na gaya maka ai ba na dama ai abin da za ka yi shi bisa doka da tsari ba za ka yi da damarsa ba kuma doka ce ta sa aka ayyana kuma doka ce za ta warware INEC da kake faɗa na kai takarda an ci ba karba ba muku nasa an karba.
Well, that's where we begin our conversation this morning. And as you've seen right there, Professor Paul Ananaba joins us to have this conversation. He is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us, Prof. Now, first of all, let's begin with your perception of these arrests, or, well, the fact that the man is in custody now. Those who are questioning it took 2 weeks. Meanwhile, he gave a press interview of sorts before he was arrested. What is that? Is that of any significance to you?
Thank you, my brother. Thank you, Nigerians. In the first place, if you look at the interview was conducted in, Yunus Harari spoke in Hausa language, which is fine. There were, I'm sure you tried to write, interpret it. I'm sure he's sufficiently knowledgeable in English. I recall he's a legal practitioner, so it would have been nice for him to speak directly, or the interpretation to be directly, so that nobody will say I was misinterpreted or I was misquoted. However, it took a while for him to be in custody, which is not a good example for such a serious and sensitive situation. He even got a point of writing from his hiding. The media was hearing him. Nigerians were asking, where was he? What the REC did contravenes the Electoral Act, and it's an offense under the Act. If you look at the Electoral Act, the duty to announce results is that of the returning officer, not the resident electoral commissioner. If you recall in our history, there was a time the resident electoral commissioners were empowered to announce results. And it caused so much problems, which is just like we had in Adamawa. It is for that reason that the returning officers were now empowered to do so. Now, you could see the magnitude of problems that singular exercise, that singular unlawful act cost Nigerians. And except that INEC and the federal government took very active and quick steps, I do not know what would have happened. That the resident electoral commissioner comes in with security agency, backed up by top security agencies in the state, and goes to announce results. Cause confusion, chaos, all that. So, if you look at his conduct is criminal offense. Going forward, active steps must be taken to ensure that any person who is not authorized to announce results like the REC order officer should not be allowed to enter the collation center.
Well, Prof,
they should not be allowed
Prof,
to enter the rooms where the result will be announced.
Can you hear me, Prof?
Amounts an offense, if you look at from section 120 of the Electoral Act to 125, you will see all the offenses, relation of duty, tolerant behavior, and all that.
Well, Prof, just 1 second, if you can hear me. We'll come to those other details in a moment or two, but still talking about the arrest, the fact that he's now in custody, he said, and as you also heard, everyone heard, at least could read the translation, said he would turn himself into the police. He said before there was no summon from the police, but now there is one. I will soon come out from hiding. In other words, he was expecting a summon from the police and he was in hiding. What do you make of that? How significant is that in the entire process? How significant do you see that being to the police in the process of this retribution, so to speak?
It is very serious. It shows, contrary to what was announced, that he has been apprehended. That the man said, I will come out. So a criminal, an alleged criminal, a suspect of that size, will only come up because he turned himself in. What if he did not turn himself in? What if? So the problem is, and the police announced that they arrested him and apprehended him in a way that he did not turn himself in. The man said he will turn himself in, and it appears that he turned himself in. It touches on our capacity as a people to apprehend alleged criminals. For example, when he went to make the announcement, he said to have gone with people at the level of commissioner in the state of police. So if you can go with the commissioner of police, head of DSS, civil defense, does it mean that you cannot be arrested easily? And now INEC summoned him to Abuja. He's also said to have flown in an aircraft, passing through security checks. So the point being made is that it's a point of lesson for our security agency. We need to up our game. We need to be in control. Nigerians didn't need to ask, where is this man? Until we begin to hear that he has turned himself in or he has not turned himself in. So it's sad that when he showed up, the man said, I turned myself in. Well, anyway, whether he turned himself in or not is now in police custody. The police must ensure that works with the Ministry of Justice so that whatever charges he needs to answer should be done quickly. So we don't have a situation of hearing that he's no longer nowhere to be found. If you remember the Minor case. So we don't want to hear such things. We want to see prosecution carried out. And the man said he will defend himself. He's a legal practitioner. He must be given that opportunity.
And Prof, that brings me to the next point. If you look at the resident electoral commissioner's argument and the argument of the camp of the senator who seemed to be in support of his illegal declaration, it has been consistent. The argument of the camp is that the resident electoral commissioner did nothing wrong by announcing the result of the election in favor of the candidate before the exercise was concluded. And the resident electoral commissioner himself, having come out now, says he did nothing wrong under the law. Perhaps there's a portion of the Electoral Act that supports their position that you'd like to explain to us, that they're citing, to stand on the right side of the law, which seems to be consistently, a subject of confusion for lawyers who have debated this case.
Well, I do not know what other people are saying, but I'm aware that Section 25 of the Electoral Act states that with the word shall, that the results shall be announced by the returning officer. At each level of election, there is a returning officer. And at the state level, there is a returning officer. Or there was an electoral returning officer. So the Electoral Act did not use shall twice. The Electoral Act did not say that the returning officer, that the resident electoral commissioner shall be a returning officer. No such duty. Like I said, in many years past, it used to be the resident electoral officer that is the returning officer, but it is not so now. So, except in the presidential election where the chief electoral officer, who is the INEC chairman, that is the returning officer. So I do not want to prejudge Guru Yunusahari. That is why an early prosecution will be important so that he will make open his defense. You will recall that in all his comments have acted within the law, He has not stated any section of the law where he acted acted on. Now, Section 26 of the Electoral Act says that every staff of INEC must be neutral. So, in the act of going to announce a result for when collation had not closed for a particular candidate, so it offends that requirement of neutrality. So I think that he needs to be given opportunity to have a day in court to raise his defense, and then let the court determine that. But as we speak now, it doesn't seem to have complied with Section 25 and 26 of the Electoral Act.
Prof, I wonder if you also agree that this throws up yet again, a need for the second look at the contention on the field of play between the resident electoral commissioners and the national commissioners. During that supplementary election exercise, there were reports of a division within the ranks of the national commissioners sent to assist him and the resident electoral commissioner. And this also immediately brings to mind events leading to the general election exercise itself, during which there were reports of division within the ranks of the Independent National Electoral Commission itself, particularly within RECs and national commissioners. Does this call for a review of the role of the resident electoral commissioner and the need for that office in the first place when you have national commissioners and returning officers? As they say, too many cooks spoil the broth.
Is there a need to review the roles? My answer is yes, because the society is dynamic, laws are dynamic. And from what we now have seen from Gudu Yunus Ahari, there's need for even not waiting for the Electoral Act to be amended, which will take a lot of time. INEC regulations should be amended, the manual and the guidelines for the election. Those three different documents must be amended as quickly as possible. Clearly showing the marks, the roles of each of these officers. Are there too many officers doing this, or virtually the same thing? That is the bane of the Nigerian society. I once discussed with a colleague, a British person, and they told me, they asked me, why is it in your country you duplicate many offices? Why? And I also heard reports, which is public, also pointed at that. Too many offices, protocols, many agencies doing about the same thing, not doing anything at all, because of expecting that it is this agency when this one is expecting the other one. So in elections, the roles of each officer and office should now be so clearly demarcated and made public, so that even if anyone wants to go outside their roles in the books, Nigerians will know whether the person is actually doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Will you imagine what followers of any of these political parties would have done when it is said that you are going to cancel a result for which the beneficiary had already announced acceptance, and it was in the media everywhere? Much more sensitive is the fact that the beneficiary is a female. He will look as if it's because it's a lady, it's a woman. That's why a result has been announced. And like Nigerians, some people would have said, if you go to court, go to tribunal, and you know as well as I do, the burden of going to a tribunal over an election as of today. It's not a tea party. So there are complications we have seen, and I believe that INEC will take steps in the short run, and then in the long run, there is need to further amend the Electoral Act.
And speaking of INEC taking steps, Prof, speaking of INEC taking steps, I wonder if, the embattled resident electoral commissioner has taken all of the attention, particularly if you recall that, accusations of complicity in that supplementary exercise went both ways, with the other party also, the APC in that election, also accusing the other party of using the government house as some form of collation center of sorts. And to that effect, has INEC been accountable enough in ensuring that investigations go both ways? And this also lends credence to the calls by civil society organizations for some state governments to be investigated for their role in the just concluded elections.
I will take a different route entirely. If we continue to do the same thing, we continue to get bad results. I look forward to an electoral process where both the security agencies and INEC will have lesser and lesser role. If we have our national identity card and you can only log in and vote at a time, we will likely get away from some of these things. We will look at professional bodies like the Nigerian Bar Association, ICANN, and others who have subscribed to electronic voting. These aspects are not their problems. As we both look at the countries, look at Ghana, look at the UK, and as you're voting, we know we will bother ourselves with regulating and being sure that there's no hacking, there's no electronic fraud. Now, every time we carry bundles of paper, carry vehicles, charter, we run, and go to places to collect to do this. Why? When these things can be done electronically. Look at Section 26 of the Electoral Act. It says that all officers must subscribe to oath of neutrality. How will it happen when politicians, in fact, at the time the election was being held, you have to use Naira to buy Naira
It's interesting. My apologies. You raised an issue about neutrality just now, and it just raised that question that I was, was on my mind as you were responding to Bukola's questions the other time. How delicate do you see that line being for security agencies, the line of neutrality? On the one hand, they are not supposed to interfere. On the other hand, the letters of the law are very clear on what to do. Now, the REC did an illegal thing, making an announcement. Security agencies were there. They are not supposed to interfere in the process, but here now is a law being broken. How delicate do you think the line is? Or you think it's just negligence on their part?
It's delicate, and I'm going to proceed from where I stopped. That this is, you also heard that there were allegations of 2 billion naira. It's not been proved, but when even 100 million is, I don't know whether you've seen 100 million naira in cash. Not less of 1 billion, 2 billion. Assuming that was the case, why would security agencies, the temptation will be very high. That's what we should eliminate. Don't give people opportunity to be tempted. Use electronics, impersonal, artificial intelligence to help us achieve better results in subsequent elections. The Adamawa has thrown open so much in terms of non-neutrality of electoral officers and non-neutrality of even security agencies. We speak as if security agencies or security personnel they are angels that cannot be compromised. We should reduce the percentage and level of compromise on the voters, on electoral officers, on security agencies. Then we'll get better results. And my prescription is let us begin to look at having a national identity card from every Nigerian. You log in, you vote. You won't vote twice. From then, we will reduce all these security agencies dominating the place. Independently, you're also depriving the security agents themselves of the opportunity to vote. But if you remove all this and we vote by our national identity card, we can do proper ballot accounting. There will be proper ballot accounting. We can account for the votes.
All right, Professor Nanaba, I've been listening very intently to the conversation you've been having with my colleagues, and a very interesting, perspective that you brought on board. The fact that you pointed out that it's taken at least 2 weeks for him to be arrested and brought into police custody. I mean, a lot of people have also raised eyebrows as to what exactly has been happening. Now, let us just, imagine, we don't know what has been happening. Let us imagine that the police perhaps were conducting an investigation and perhaps wanted to have their facts before they arrested him. Maybe that's why it took this long. But, under what grounds, or if it's going to be charged, on what grounds will we be looking at? I mean, will we be looking at what laws would we say he's broken in the Electoral Act or the Constitution?
Like I said, there is Section 25. We shouldn't be tried in the media. That's what I think he's going to announce the result when he is not the returning officer. It's not supported by Section 25 of the Electoral Act. That duty is for the returning officer. If it is then when he's being prosecuted that he should raise his defense if he has any. And Section 26 also, as I've been saying, it ought to be neutral. If it's neutral, it speaks to the fact that when at the collation point they took a break to later assemble and get more results, and he goes alone without even the returning officer. When he did that, he was no longer neutral. Now, if you go to Section 120 of the Electoral Act, Section 125, you will see the offenses and the punishment, the dereliction of duty, unlawful acts on the day of election, order. Those are there. Now, it is for the Minister of Justice to clearly look at the entire acts and prefer charges. I'm not going to tell them what charge we prefer, but even in the Ministry of Justice, there are experts in drafting charges. But I can give them a hint that you see the offenses in Section 120, 21, 122, 123, 124, 125. They are there. So if that is done, the delay in charging some people like this creates so much problems, because in my place where I'm from, we have a proverb that if you dissect the animal when it died, it will not turn its neck. But when you, over time, before you apprehend a public officer who is not gone out of Nigeria, it shouldn't take more than 24 hours to get him arrested.
So we need to ask questions of the Nigeria police as to why it's taken this long, because we saw the controversy, as to, whether or not they could arrest without a letter from INEC. And INEC issued that letter in good time. They also confirmed the receipt of the letter issued by INEC. So indeed, I mean, perhaps we should be asking questions of the Nigeria police, shouldn't we?
Well, Nigerians have their fundamental rights, then the Freedom of Information Act. to transport them. Speaking for myself, I do not think that the REC has immunity under any law. I do not know of any law that prohibits the police from arresting a REC that is committing an offense in the public glare. I don't see why we need to go to INEC to write a letter. INEC will write, send to police, to authorize the police or what? Section 214 of the Constitution does not provide for that. So I don't think so. I don't think it is right. I don't know of anything in the Police Act says that the police should not arrest a resident electoral commissioner except there's a letter from INEC.
Well, you've spoken about Section 25 as the area where, perhaps they might start to find the infractions that he's committed, talking about who should announce the results of elections. The results of the election shall be announced by the presiding officer at the polling unit, ward collation officer at the registration area, or ward collation center. But listening to it goes on and on. There is A, B, C, D. And then there's also number 2, the returning officer shall announce the result and declare the winner of the election at. Then it goes on to list these areas where the returning officer should be the one declaring the results. 2 questions. One of them is hypothetical. One, if Mr. Yunusa Ari had announced the person who was eventually declared winner, would it, one, have been unlawful? That's one question I wanted to address, because part of the reason why this raises a lot of controversy is the fact that the person whom he announced was not the winner eventually announced by the returning officer. So for people who wonder if he had announced the right person, would it have been, would it have been unlawful? Would it have been as serious as it's been taken? That's one. Then 2, or perhaps maybe you should answer that one first.
The question is very important. The offense has nothing to do with who is the beneficiary. It is that Section 25 says this is the person that should do this act. It doesn't say it will be right. There's no proviso that, okay, it will be right if eventually the person he announced is the actual winner. The point is we must respect law, order, and due process in this country. Now, even if it was Int'l that he announced at the first point, he would still be committed the same offense. That initial announcement would have been unlawful, as clearly stated by INEC. It is when the INEC concludes its collation and the return officer makes a return that we can then say it is right or right. So some people may buy into the sentiments. It doesn't change the position of the law. The law is that a REC cannot announce results for good reason. And that's right.
Why do you think Mr. Ari appears very confident, though? He says the law will absolve him. I mean, I don't speak Hausa, but the interpretation of what we heard, what we saw, was that he believes that he will be absolved in a court of law. He's very confident that the law backs him. Is there any part of our laws, our constitution, or our electoral act that backs his action?
I will not judge him. He's a legal practitioner who ought to know.
Okay.
And if he's insisting that is acted within the law, it will be good to hear him in court.
Professor Anlaba, it will be an interesting time in the court. I mean, to see where the lawyer is. If we're reading as it is in the Electoral Act that he's gone contrary to the sections of the Electoral Act, and he insists that the law would absolve him. It will be really interesting to follow that case through and through. But let's look at this other bit that you spoke about earlier. You talked about the electoral officials are not exactly saints, even the security officials. It appears that the electoral officials and security operatives that usually are part of the electoral process are overexposed. So what can be done? What should be done to shield them from overexposure to the politicians, to the political parties, or to anybody that might seek to influence their actions in order for them, or so that they might find themselves at the end of the day going contrary to the laws that put them there?
All right, I've spoken so much about that. We should continue to move in the direction of making our elections impersonal. These security agencies and INEC officials are not saints. Many of them are compromised. Many of them, their brothers, their sisters, their wives, their relations are officials of some parties and are running elections in some parties, and may have been trained by some big wigs who are in some parties. So there's some degree of loyalty some point, so that may lead to compromise. We should get impersonal with our elections.
Well, you repeated that point, Prof, quite significantly this morning, and I want to believe that is well taken, even though there are elements of the law that talked about technology, not just all of it. There was just one point that I wanted you to take before we go off, before the conversation ends. It's the same REC that announced the suspension of the collation of results and announcement of the results. Was that within his purview? Because no one is talking about that one.
It was not within his purview.
But the announcement he made to suspend the collation stood, and everyone abided by it.
Well, it is when you find the head of the man who went to war that you will start asking about the bangles on his neck. So, at the collection center, the returning officer is in charge. So
essentially, you are saying that the REC ought to have been seen and not heard at all of that proceeding.
Or ought to allow the returning officer to do his work.
Okay.
The returning officer, in announcing results, a result is not just announced like pick it off the shelf.
Okay.
Local government by local government, in this particular case, will be bringing their results and will be tendering them and will be announced.
It would seem then, Prof, that the offenses are more than just one, and let's just wait as you are saying.
That's why I gave the window that the offenses are between section 120 125 of the electoral act.
Okay. We have to thank you very much this morning, Prof, for your legal perspectives and perhaps giving an inkling to what Nigerians should expect in the coming days. Professor Paul Ananaba is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time this morning. We're back after now to take on another issue similar. We'll be back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The powers conferred on me and the Speaker want to put it to vote that those in favor that the following members of this House of Assembly should be suspended immediately to vote. And they are Right Honorable Ifeanyi Uchendu, Right Honorable Int'l, Right Honorable Chimendo Kalo, Chukwudi Abu, is suspended from the House for 1 month, with all benefits suspended within that period. Those in favor of this motion to say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
I do solemnly swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and that I will preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So help me God.
That video that you saw, does it have any resemblance to this place you are now?
No, sir.
Was it conducted here?
No, sir.
Was a purported misguided action by some renegades in the House of Assembly, sponsored by some overzealous aides, all in the name of showing some weak points and all that. So the House of Assembly is properly constituted here. The former Deputy Speaker is suspended and removed from office, and we have a new Deputy Speaker here. The Majority Leader of the House is here. And we have formed our quorum, and we have done the business of the day.
Well, that controversy, as you have read and seen and heard, isn't just going to go away. The controversial impeachment of the Speaker of the Abia State House of Assembly, Honorable Chinedum Inaya Oji, is what we want to discuss now. We are expecting that two parties will be here, as we hinted at earlier. But right now we have Honorable Jerry Uzosike, who is a member representing Umuahia South State Constituency. He joins us, of course, virtually. Thank you so much this morning, Honorable Uzosike, for joining us. Now, exactly where do you stand on this? Does the Speaker stand impeached where you are, or the Deputy Speaker stands suspended and removed from office?
Thank you so much for bringing me. I stand on equity. I stand with the law. The Speaker was not even impeached ab initio. The issue of purported impeachment was only a carrot and a show of shame for people who ought to know the position of the law, but they choose to do it differently. For me, there are procedures of impeaching a Speaker or Deputy Speaker of the House of Assembly. It is clear in the Constitution and in our rules, because you know that every legislature relies on two most important documents. The first document the legislature relies
Honorable, can you?
on,
Okay.
and we rely on this. And in our own case, Section 90 runs down to Section 100. Talks a lot about the legislature, but on in Section 101, it gives us the powers, the legislature, the powers to have to handle our own rules. Where we now have the second document. This second document is the most important document in the House of Assembly. So, how to remove a Speaker or any principal officer of the House is enshrined here, and so. Nothing like the removal of the Speaker, but the Deputy Speaker, the former Deputy Speaker was removed yesterday for the acts of gross misconduct and the shame he brought to the 7th Assembly that is even minding up. So I stand with the law, and the Speaker is not impeached, but the former Deputy Speaker was impeached. Honorable Uchendo was impeached yesterday and then replaced with a more honorable member, right, Honorable Mandela Obasi.
Isn't it significant for you, first of all, the number of people that perpetrated this act, if we can put it that way? So did the House of Assembly see this coming, particularly against some of the comments attributed to the governor, that some people wanted him to be always against the governor, but particularly attributed to the Speaker, beg your pardon, saying that some members wanted him to always be at loggerheads with the governor, but he refused because it's not necessary. Did the House see this coming?
Yeah, you know that we went on Synod on February 14th, the Lovers' Day. That was the day we shut down to allow members to go for elections. Elections have come and gone. A lot of people, most people lost some. Up to 12 new members or 14 new members are coming. And a lot of people are angry with the results of the election. So returning back, there are agitations. But the Speaker also feels that no matter what the result of the last election is, that he cannot be under pressure to make unnecessary demands. But some people feel that he should, and he said no. And I think we feel that some people were angry, but that for the extent they went, became now shameful.
Honorable Uzosike, in relation to the question my colleague Ayo just asked, does this perhaps have anything to do with the denials the Assembly had to make about a month ago that that it planned to impeach the governor? Does this perhaps have anything to do with that denial?
Well, there were rumors that some people were planning to impeach the governor, and some of us laughed at it because impeachment has a procedure. Impeachment is not all about talking, I want to impeach. Some may feel that the Speaker may be blocking their way to try to pressurize the executive in one thing or the other. But I don't want to link the two. But I believe that some people are so desperate in the dying minutes of this 7th Assembly. But to get what ordinarily that should be their allowances or unpaid anything. But the way to go about it is different from the way the leadership, particularly the Speaker, sees it. And the Speaker feels that, look, yes, there are things that the members ought to have received. Maybe due to paucity of funds, we've not received it. And in these last moments of the Assembly, we should be very much serious, bringing up reports from all the committees, reporting, rounding up in law, which they say winding up. You know, it's not a time we now begin to bombard the executive here and there. That we should present our position without being acrimonious about it. So you may link the two, but for me, I feel that you may not get all you want at any point in life, but things that are reasonable, you may receive them.
So are those the issues then, Honorable Uzosike? Are those the issues, getting your entitlements from the executive, and perhaps the Speaker has not been able to pull his weight in that regard, and then the House demanded a change such that it can enjoy the benefits that it ought to?
Yes, I tell you this. I have looked at the media. I only saw signatures of, they listed up to about 14, 15, 16 signatures. In the video, I saw about 7, 8 persons, and all the signatures they concocted, they started, people, imagine writing signatures of people who are in Canada. They have even brought up the press release denying those being part of it. Now, if there are demands, and those demands are legitimate, the Speaker believes that we should pursue it without rancor and without being desperate. That we should even be more serious now in winding up in all committees. I chair public accounts. The Speaker has given me 2 weeks to submit a report on all the financial transactions of the state for the House of Assembly. And this occupies all the committees. It shouldn't be when we are running up and down, but we also believe that the governor should be, is a reasonable governor, ought to understand that if a member is easing out in the next few days, his rights and privileges and entitlements ought to give. But I have watched to see the accusations of those 7 members against the Speaker. I only saw a video that gross misconduct, financial this. We waited to see the documents because if you allege, you prove. We wanted to see the specifics of the Speaker did this, the Speaker did that. I've not seen up to this moment. And in a decent climb like this, for us, we cannot be in a jackass assembly. Neither is this a banana assembly or under a banana republic. Time has gone when things like that can take place. The House of Assembly that has over 6 lawyers. Some have practiced over 20-something years at the bar. So how can you just come and allege something against the Speaker without substantiating it? Place it on the table. We will support you to impeach the Speaker if the Speaker have gone against the oaths he took. But not just say something and you want the Speaker to maybe kill the governor and bring money? Because I have waited to see what those accusations against the Speaker is.
Now, Honorable Zosike, if the agitations are valid but the approaches are wrong and some of the allegations are unsubstantiated, what about the timing? What about the timing of this, impeachment plot, so to speak, which is coming about 3 weeks to handover date, and there's an inevitable change of guard in Abia State? Is the House perhaps jittery that there's a new government coming and it would like to, so to speak, secure its position in the Assembly?
There is, we're not jittery, and there's a new government coming on board. For me, my party, PDP, is not part of that government, and except some members that are returning on that PDP. But then I see a fourth columnist in this issue. I see the hand of Esau and the voice of Jacob. The reason is that this thing started from outside. I think some people wanted to get at the Speaker because there's allegations which has not been disproved, that monies were shared, thousands of dollars were shared to some members to go for that show of shame. So where did the money come from? And it's not from the governor, because I personally met the governor. And the governor said his hands and legs are not in this show of shame. But the governor has made a press release on this matter. So who is sponsoring this impeachment? Who is giving this? Unfortunately, these are our colleagues. These thousands of dollars to remove a man that have done nothing. The timing is not wrong. Let me tell you why the timing is not wrong. If a crime is being committed or an offense is being committed, I am a lawyer. I believe that whenever there is an offense, there must be a remedy. If a speaker of the parliament commits an impeachable offense, even if it is a day to the end of our tenure, by the way, our tenure is 4 years, which will end on the 10th of June. If the speaker commits offense on the 6th of June, I will support him to be impeached on the 6th of June, without prejudice that the time is remaining 4 days. So the timing is not wrong if a crime is committed. But
okay. Honorable Zosike, if I may come in here, it's a good thing that you have stuck with the Constitution. You in your submissions, you said you abide by the laws. And in your 24 members in the Abia State House of Assembly, the alleged impeachment of the speaker was signed by 16 people, howbeit outside of the chambers. You say it started outside, and then the removal of the deputy speaker was done by 9 people, which is a quorum going by the Constitution. one wonders, if you guys, in your laws and in your rule books, you said you are allowed to work things out amongst yourself, you are allowed to decide by the Constitution and your own rule books, how is it then that at the time when you're winding down all your activities, suddenly out of the blues, you're now beginning to want to impeach each other or remove each other from offices that you have occupied for years? What exactly is going on? Is it service to the people of Abia State or service to the legislators yourselves?
If you watch yesterday, we didn't rely on that distraction. Yesterday alone, the House of Assembly passed a very important bill. They had a very important health bill. We passed the ASCOM bill, they call it collegiate bill. Yesterday, the House of Assembly also cleared. Yesterday, I'm sorry, people are interjecting. Yesterday, the House of Assembly also cleared Auditor General of the local government. So you see that the president, the speaker, is not even distracted. It is in the interest of the state. I'm saying this. If a speaker commits an offense,
but Uzasike, you guys have been together for more than 3 years. So how is it then that suddenly, in the midst of all of that, you now want to remove your speaker or remove your deputy speaker and bring a new speaker, a new deputy speaker that will run for how many weeks? 4 to 6 weeks?
It is a surprise that 7 members went to a private house.
Did you say 7?
7 members.
Not 16.
They have a video. Let them release the video to you. There is a video. There is a video online. I can push the video to you. There is a video. The members, they wrote their names there. Honorable Mona Chimalosia is in Abuja. Honorable Stanley Wabisi is in faraway Canada. The people there, Honorable from Okwa West, was in Okwa West. And they concocted those signatures and said, there is a video showing how many members. And impeachment is not something impeachment requires body presence. Somebody that wants...
I hope you know that forging somebody's signature is a crime. And it has to be proven. So you're alleging that the signatures of your members were forged by other members. Are you going to take them to court? Are you going to let the police know about that?
Yesterday, the 7th Assembly invited the Commissioner of Police and the DSS to move in. If you go to media this morning, Honorable Member representing Ikuano constituency made a press release right from Canada that this is where I have been in the last 3 weeks in Canada, that he never signed anything. And I can also mention others who weren't part of that perfect. So we have invited the Commissioner of Police and DSS yesterday at the city to investigate this topic. To now finish what I was saying, we removed the deputy speaker, the former deputy speaker, without any delay because he led that shameful act. How can a deputy speaker of the 7th Assembly, who ought to know, go to a private residence without a clerk? When our rule book says voting even will be by the clerk, he controls the voting.
We have another opinion coming in on this conversation now, just so we can get all sides of the story, as we always do. Honorable Ifeanyi Uchendu also joins us this morning. He is also a member of the House of Assembly in Abia State. Thank you so much for joining us, Honorable Uchendu. Well, you probably have listened to a little bit of what Honorable Uzosike has said so far. How do you respond?
All he has said here is not true. Of what you speak is not true. So far as I'm concerned, 16 members send their consent to impeach the speaker over misconduct and abuse of office. This man has pocketed us for years now, and the members came together and said, we don't want this man again. Just like me now, he has not paid me for 9 months. He keep eating my entitlements, telling me it is by his own discretion that he can pay me. We have experienced a lot from this man. And these members said they are tired. The day we impeached him, we were 12 in number. We were 12 in number. And we impeached him. He's no longer the speaker. And they went to the House of Assembly and with 7 members. And they said they have impeached a deputy speaker that is supposed to be impeached with 2/3 of the members. It is not possible. So I have listened to all the lies.
We're still on that conversation, Honorable Uchendu, but speak to one of the issues that have been raised about the location. I mean, you and your team conducted the exercise somewhere outside of the hallowed chambers of the House of Assembly in Abia State, but the Speaker of the Abia State House of Assembly conducted another process within the hallowed chambers of the Abia State House of Assembly. Ordinary common logic says, I mean, that's more valid than what you conducted, irrespective of the numbers.
What you did was so valid. The Constitution said if there is insecurity in the house because he mobbed the youth of his communities in the house, you can use another government premises in the state. And that is exactly what we did. We used another government premises in the state. Okay. And that's where we beat him because they have already mobilized all the bad guys in Umaya to be around the complex. And we need to remove him that day because we are tired.
Just to be clear, just to be clear, Honorable, now that you say you have impeached the Speaker of the Abia State House of Assembly, and the Speaker of the House of Assembly says he's not been impeached, rather you have been suspended and removed from office as Deputy Speaker, who will the governor listen to, or how will the governor listen to you as opposed to the other party?
The governor knows I'm still the Deputy Speaker of the state. By Constitution, you know that Section 92, if you read it very well, there is a process to remove the Deputy Speaker. If they use that process and sign 16 signatures and bring to the House and say they have impeached me, I will understand. 7 persons going to the House of Assembly, mobilizing the whole bad boys in Omaya with the police to come and say you have impeached a Deputy Speaker, you know that is not possible. So far as I'm concerned, I'm still the Deputy Speaker of the state. And he is no longer the Speaker of the Assembly. It is even a shame that 16 persons signed against you.
Honorable Uchendu, just to clarify some of the things you said this man has pocketed you, if I got you correctly. That's one. You also said that... Hold on there. You also said he has not paid you for 9 months, you personally. I wonder if the Speaker is supposed to pay you directly, or your remuneration is really in charge of the Service Commission, Assembly Service Commission, or something like that. And are you the only one being owed? And can you back up all of these claims with documentary evidence?
Yes, I have the chats. I've been chatting with him since 1 week now. He has been holding my security coach, all my allowances for months now. I've been begging him to pay me. I bluntly refused to pay me. He bluntly refused. I've been chatting with him. I said, my brother, I don't have a problem with you. Give me what is due to me. He said he can only do it.
Are you the only one owed, or other assembly members are owed as well?
My sister, they are to what is happening in the house. This man will go and do a lot of things at our behind, collect money and eat. There is a lot of things behind that. Before 16 persons, it's a shameful thing. The Speaker of the House, we've been enduring him. 16. The few 2-3 that joined him, his people he gave money. Okay. Because you feel he has the money. He gave money to come and join him.
Just one more thing there. The video that we're being supplied doesn't have 16 persons. Honorable Uzosike says there are just about 6 of you in that alleged impeachment plot.
We were 12 in number, and we had the 16 signatures. Because most of the people that signed on that day were not around in the state. So 12 were available in the state. The remaining 4 traveled.
Okay. Well, let me quickly take a quick response. Just 1 second, Honorable, because we really have to close now. But let's take a quick response from Honorable Uzosike on the same issue. You've listened to him as well, particularly concerning the payment of members of the House. What is the problem? What's going on?
My brother, he will say anything.
No, Honorable Chandoji, can you just hold on and let's hear him speak? Allow him to speak for himself. Go ahead, please.
It's very unfortunate that the Deputy Speaker is saying this after 4 years of being a Deputy Speaker. The Speaker, yes, the Speaker doesn't pay us. The Clerk of the House pays all members of the House of Assembly. And let me say this. Everything that comes to House of Assembly is statutory. It's statutory. Every member gets what belongs to him. Now, let me not even talk much about this because I cannot sit in the House and the Deputy Speaker, former Deputy Speaker says he's not paid and some of us will keep quiet. Okay, imagine what he said, that they were 12. Watch the video you have and see whether you see 12 persons.
Okay.
And then can 12 persons comfortably impeach a speaker? Can 12 persons impeach a speaker where we have 24 members of the House of Assembly?
What's interesting, Honorable Uzosike, is that we've seen worse in this republic, and as media men, we just have to report what we have with us. Gentlemen, we have to thank you very much at this point, and thank you for being a part of our program today. Honorable Jerry Uzosike, member representing Umuahia South State constituency, as well as Honorable Ifeanyi Uchendu, former Deputy Speaker. Also, it seems. I guess over time we'll see more of this. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning. Now, we started,
Thank you so much.
Yes, we started with a conversation around World Press Freedom Day. Let's take that on when we return from this break. It's World Press Freedom Day 2023. How far so far? What are the high points of Nigeria's media and what are those low points? What are the challenges that have had to be encountered? And please, what's there to be done? Let's have this conversation, as you have seen there, with Lanre Arugundade, Executive Director, International Press Center. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Mark, my colleague earlier, when we began the conversation, referenced the, should I say the famous or infamous 1993 elections that produced the longest, what I would call the longest session of activism in our democratic process. It was against the military, it wasn't within a democracy, and it lasted 5 years, 1993 to 1998, when the activities around having the Fourth Republic began. Can you give us a quick recap of that time and how significant it was for the press to have taken that on with CSOs?
Well, I would say very, very significant. Incidentally, you know, today we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the World Press Freedom Day. So actually, World Press Freedom Day came into existence in that same 1993.
But a month before the election.
A month before the elections. And the origin itself was in Africa, because in 1991, there was a global media conference in Windhoek, Namibia, where there was a declaration. It's popularly called the Windhoek Declaration on an independent and pluralistic African press. From that declaration, UNESCO and the United Nations later said, let's have a global celebration of World Press Freedom Day. So in a sense, without knowing it, we were actually celebrating, press freedom when, we were fighting, the military. And what really happened, really, was that the media collectively and through its organizations put itself at the vanguard of that, struggle, because the media was the only organization that could do that. Of course, we have the pro-democracy organizations, the human rights groups, the trade unions, everybody fighting, going on strike. But the media was a vehicle of expression
for everyone.
And it's quite symbolic, because if you look at the theme of this year's World Press Freedom Day, it talks about shaping a future of rights, freedom of expression as driver of all other human rights. So in 1993, we saw how the press, as the vehicle of freedom of expression, became the driver of the struggle against the military, in Nigeria, and it came with enormous prices. You talked about 1993 to 1998. Within that period, many journalists ran into exile. And sometimes people like us are pained that when we celebrate the heroes of democracy, we don't really celebrate, the media. And even when we celebrate the media, we celebrate those who were jailed, those who were in detention, which is correct, but there were many others who paid prices. Let me give you this example. I was working in National Concord during this period. I was features editor. Sikake Sen was our editor. The National Concord was shut down twice. The first time, the military said they were looking for ammunition in our premises, and then they reopened us. But the second time, they shut National Concord, and hundreds of journalists lost their jobs, particularly because MK Abiola later died in detention. Punch newspapers was also shut down, The Guardian. So we have so many journalists that paid prices that, in fact, if we were to publish a book on that moment, it will run into volumes. But the good thing, and I guess the point you are trying to make, is that if we look back 1993 and now, what we should be celebrating is the fact that without the media, we won't have this democracy. Journalists were taken before military tribunals, tried for being accessories after the fact of a coup, simply because they helped, to provide information. Things were going on in the military, and you had courageous journalists from the News Tempo then, the Tell magazine, and a number of them. And they were taking, it's really, I don't think it has happened in any part of the world where journalists will be taken before a military tribunal, and you know the implication. You could be sentenced to death. Invariably, they were given life sentences, the likes of, Kunle Ajibade and the rest of them. Our families were affected. You see, in the desperation to get at some journalists, the security agents decided that if we don't get the people we want, we will pick their relatives. So I recall, for example, that Dakpolo Yomi's wife had a 3-month-old baby then, and then they came for him, they didn't get him, and then they decided to arrest the wife with the kid. There was one Bumi Aborishade who was publishing a magazine called June 12 magazine. The wife was heavily pregnant. Then they came for him. He ran away. He had to go into exile and abandoned, the poor, woman, here in Nigeria. I think that those children now should also be happy, and they will be shocked that so while we were kids, all these kind of things, were happening to us. We had a person like Soji Omotunde, who was abducted in broad daylight. I mean, it was when they be looking for him, and they grabbed him and subjected him to all kind of inhuman treatment. We had Nero Molalu, for example, too, who spent years in detention because they said, he knew about a coup and whatever.
And there were several others, as you have.
There were several others.
Publisher of,
so I think that
publisher of Razor magazine.
The publisher of Razor magazine
said to have
by Moshood Fayemiwo.
Yeah.
In his own case, we didn't even know his whereabouts. He had suddenly disappeared. And when Bumi Aborishade was now detained and taken to, at that time, journalists were being taken to underground cell at the DMI in Apapa. That was where, and then when they threw him there, it's already discovered that there was Moshood Fayemiwo, manacled. His hands were, he was made standing, and then his hands were tied up like this, and then his legs were in chains. It was just something that you
couldn't. Isn't it ironic at that time,
Mr. Believe.
At that time, World Press Freedom Day started in the very same year that press freedom was shackled.
Exactly. In fact, it was like the military then was trying to say this press freedom does not have anything to do with us.
Is that to say that it wasn't communicated or whatever it was that Nigeria signed up to was signed up to without recourse to the authorities, or I don't know. What do you make of that?
Well, we were under the military anyway, and the military didn't necessarily believe in press freedom. As a matter of fact, it had been a running battle up to that point. You see, when the then General Muhammad Buhari, for example, took over the reins of power in the coup of 1983, and he was interviewed. And I remember that interview with the Punch newspapers. And what he said there was that I will tamper with the press. That was the language he used. Well, he was a military leader. Then he said, I will tamper with the press. And they did, because we had Decree 4 of 1984, which made it an offense for a news medium to publish the truth if the truth was not approved by the Supreme Military Council. That was how Nduka Irabo and Tunde Thompson were clamped with OJ. So for the military, we knew that there was a press freedom celebration already at the level of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, for example, at the level of other organizations, of the media. But it was just that the military didn't bother to be concerned, really. Okay. But like I said, what we did was to take a historical, decision to assist Nigerian people, because we realized that everybody was suffering under the military. The rights didn't, exist. And it was the media that could really, fight, for those rights, including the rights of even military men themselves. Okay. And that was how they really saw the media, as a threat, and they felt, we had to do something about the media. But the good thing was that, in spite of all those, repression, the courage that the media in Nigeria demonstrated was something that was almost unbelievable. Because everything you were doing was at a risk. Even then, we were in the leadership at some time of the Nigerian Union of Journalists in Lagos State. A majority of the journalists affected were from the Lagos State Council. So we couldn't keep quiet. We were issuing statements. We were reaching out to international media organizations, and they responded very well. The likes of Chris Anyanwu, who now became a senator, a woman, was among those who were taken, before the military and put in detention indefinitely.
And it's a good time. It's a good time to take stock. If you look down 30 years down the line, when we are now talking about the dividends of democracy, when we have, that big symbol of democracy, the National Assembly, without which many would say that we do not have a democracy. Would you say that the Nigerian press, being forged in the furnace of affliction, paying, most of the time, the ultimate price for where we are today, does the Nigerian press have the pride of place that it deserves, as having sacrificed ultimately for this democracy?
Well, I don't think, we are occupying that pride of place that you described. And one worrisome trend is that if you also look at the trajectory of our development, some of who fought for this press freedom, get into government and begin to negate those same things, that we fought for. It's really a matter, of irony. And if you look at civilian, democracy, for example, we're documenting, rather unfortunately, many more attacks than what we witnessed in the military. The military situation was quite bizarre, so they could take you before military tribunal. But how do you explain that we're in a democracy, we have some of those who fought for this democracy as journalists, as leaders of media organizations, working with governments, as special advisors on media and so on, and they tend to justify the curtailment, of press freedom, which for me should not be the case. In 2022, just at the level of the International Press Center alone, we documented 66 attacks on journalists and the media. And that does not mean that captured everything, that happened, because sometimes some journalists are too afraid to talk about the threats that they face. And that was much more than what was witnessed in 2021. Or look at the last elections, for example. Although the good thing is we didn't have as many attacks as we had in 2019. But at least up to about 20 journalists were still harassed, in the course of duty. So for me, we have not really made that kind of progress that should reflect the fact that we're in a democracy. I recall your earlier discussion. You talked about the fact that press freedom goes with responsibilities. And I'm sure there are listeners out there who would say, well, you know, the media, too, you have your excesses. I know we've faced some criticism during the last elections. And some of our colleagues were accused.
We'll come to that.
Okay.
We'll come to that definitely because, I mean, there are gaps to fill. But, you know, going back to the issue that Bukola raised and the response you gave, let's speak about the political space itself. And you have rightly identified two categories of spaces in which mostly journalists occupy. One, we have journalists like Chris Anyanwu, you mentioned, Smart Adeyemi, Abike Dabiri, all in government now. Exactly. And quite a number of others in houses of assembly, and National Assembly and the rest of them, who were journalists or who are still journalists.
Yeah,
and one way or the other,
always a journalist.
Exactly, one way or the other, they find themselves in government now. That's one space. The other space is the appointment of speakers, or rather spokespersons to the authorities, chief press secretaries, information officers at the local
commissioners,
information officers at the local government level, information commissioners, all journalists across the board. So one wonders then, what, in your opinion, changes? Because the expectation, I mean, we have taken issues up here about collapsed buildings, and we know that engineers, we have engineers in federal, state, and local governments, ministries of works and related agencies of government like that. We have lawyers at government levels, and we still have some things happening that we're wondering, isn't this judicial anymore? So do we have journalists flooring the entire space of government at all levels. Yet we have these issues that you are raising about press, gagging of press freedom and the rest of them. What do you think is missing? Is it the ethics that are missing, or something they get new information that they did not get when they were on the outside?
So I think what is missing, or is it what is missing? What changes, like you said, is the fact that when they go into government, and even me, if I go to government tomorrow, you're dealing with a different ethics. The ethics of the profession is about access to information. It's about, professionalism. It's about the fact that give the other side equal opportunity. For example, during campaigns, we talk about the fact that the media should give equitable access to political parties and candidates. But the ethics of politicians is different. Their own ethics is an ethics of news that is continuously favorable to them. News that is not critical of their conduct. Their ethics that frowns at investigative journalism that exposes corruption. So when you as a journalist now becomes a spokesperson for a politician that ad initio does not believe in press freedom, your duty is to ensure that all news that come out are favorable.
I'm at a loss.
You're at a loss.
Just a second. Let me ask you. I understand what you're saying.
So what I'm saying is that...
I understand, but let me raise this. You said that their ethics change when they get into these offices, and that's a problem, in my opinion. Here is why. The doctor's ethics don't change whichever hospital he gets to. The lawyer's ethics don't change. They may try to change it, but it doesn't change. The ethics of an accountant doesn't change. The engineer's ethics doesn't change, because if you misuse, if you miscalculate certain things in the equipment or materials, the house will come down, whether it's a federal house or local or private house. So, why does the ethic of the journalist change?
The ethics. I'm not justifying. The ethics shouldn't change. A journalist, even if you are in government, should strive to fight for press freedom. And in some instances, some of them had actually done that. If you look at the history of the Freedom of Information Act, for example, a number of them, contributed. Abike Dabiri, for example, was one of the original sponsors, of the bill. So there are instances where, as journalists, they've played one role. But what I'm telling you is the fact that you are a journalist, but you are also working with a politician that does not believe in access to information. The moment you subscribe to that, you are treading a very dangerous ground. Now, for the other professions that you mentioned, they also have organizations, powerful organizations that could discipline you on the basis of the work you do. Do we have that in the media? And then can we actually say that the work they do is journalistic work, to the extent that you now say, by your conduct, you violated the code and we could sanction you. What the media can do and what the media organization should be doing is to say that as Nigerian Guild of Editors, as Nigerian Union of Journalists, you have been a member. So if you are now in government and you support unlawful arrest and detention of journalists, and you take all those steps, those organizations could have a black book.
But
they could have a hall of shame. Because I'm just saying that, you see, what they do really when they are in government, we must understand that it's no longer journalism, at best PR, because and it's quite unfortunate, it's quite ironic. And so for me, what we need to look at is how we can have very, very strong professional body that can come out and say, on the basis of your conduct, we are no longer, for example, we have people that will make fellows of Nigerian Guild of Editors. So if somebody is a fellow of the guild, and the guild had its own ethics, and you go into government, and your government is clamping journalists to detention, and you are defending that, we need a guild of editors that would say, we're withdrawing your fellowship.
I'm still conflicted there, Mr. Arugundade.
Why are you conflicted?
Because that's just one aspect of the job. In extreme cases, when you cross over to that other side, there are ethics of confidentiality. In extreme cases, there are ethics of secrecy.
Sure.
So I've had senior colleagues who have said, I got several offers, to become a spokesperson, and I turned them down. So shouldn't we begin to say that once they cross over to the other side, some of them call it call to service, and that's the justification for accepting the offer. So shouldn't we begin to say that once they cross over to the other side and begin to work in the corridors of power, that they are no longer journalists?
Exactly. So we should limit our expectations. That's what I'm saying. That's the point. Because you still assume that these people, are journalists. They will say they are journalists. They remain journalists. But the truth of the matter is that the work that they do, in most instances, is actually antithetical to what journalism should be all about.
Essentially, we can say then
so
that
for me, so we limit exactly. So we should limit our expectations, because they are doing the opposite of what they should be doing. When, as an editor, now as we're here, all we're trying to do is, get information, do everything. When they are there, their job is really it's a different form of gatekeeping.
They become the source that they were looking for. There are some issues. My apologies, because we're really running out of time. There are some issues that you wanted to go to the other time. What are the gaps within the Nigerian media space, print, electronic, and now online? That's completely liberalized now, that need to be filled, and how?
I think we need to fill the ethical and professional gaps. And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that you have the online space, which has kind of disrupted, the whole process of news production. Because in those days, you really have gatekeepers in the newsrooms, in the sense that a reporter goes out of the field, brings a story, and you give the story to a sub-editor or somebody in the newsroom who goes through, raises questions and so on. Now, because of the advent of the internet, because everybody wants to break the news, you are in a hurry. Stories just go out, fly there directly without the proper checks that should happen. That for me is a gap that should be filled, really, in terms of how we do our work. That in itself is a major gap, and we really have to find that space. See, I try to say this all the time. Don't be in a rush to break a news that will cause a problem, because indeed we don't really have breaking news anymore. Because when you think it's a broken news, I mean, the breaking news
broken.
It's already broken. Yeah,
Mr. Arugundade, 30 seconds to respond to this one. Some of the issues that you have raised just now is as a result of the welfare of journalists. That's a gap, isn't it?
It's a gap. In fact, welfare itself is a press freedom issue. So when we talk about World Press Freedom Day, the threat to press freedom is not just all these incidents of arrest and so on. Poor welfare, poor resources is also a threat. And we need to have conversations around that. The economic survival of the media, the survival of the journalists themselves, who needs to be well-resourced, well-protected, given insurance when going to cover dangerous assignments, so that at the end of the day, you are not at the whims and caprice of of those that you are trying, to cover. As we see during the political processes, where the candidates that you are covering are the ones providing for your needs, for your movement. It does not augur well. It's a gap that needs to be filled.
I think, let me assume that it's one of those...
protecting them during the attacks as well. If we recall, some of our colleagues...
We really have to go, Bukola. Lanle Ndade, Executive Director, International Press Center. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Truly appreciate the time.
Bukola.
Well, there are so many issues that you may have also brought in on the program today. And guess what? I guess that's about the much we can take, isn't it?
We're totally out of time. We'll not be able to take your mails today, but we will surely do that tomorrow. I want to thank you very much for being on, for allowing us share your morning on this World Press Freedom Day. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Koka.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.
Well, the passionate Ayo takes the blame for all of that. Thank you so much for watching this morning. I'm Malkwe Yusuf.
Indeed, Ayo was just expressing his freedom, just like we all. But in the midst of expressing your freedom, there is responsibility. Do ensure that you're responsible. I'm Neo Taigbe. Thank you for watching.